Welcome to the YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline. I'm your host for this segment that's sponsored by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. And we've done a series of segments now focusing on one of the unique programs at the Naval Postgraduate School, the Undersea Warfare Program. Admiral Ellis was on. He's the chair of that program, Undersea Warfare Chair. Now we'd like to highlight just a couple of the students that dealing in that program, what they did and what their background is and what they're studying and their research. First, we'd like to welcome Lieutenant James Davis to the show. Welcome, James.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate being here.
Well, usually what we start off, you represent one of 1,400 of MPS students that are resident at the Naval Postgraduate School. You all are professionals in your own right, and you come for your graduate education. And what we like to do is start off a little bit learning more about you. So why did you join the Navy, James?
Well, as a high schooler, I knew I wanted to join one of the military branches.
Where did you go to school?
In Springfield, Illinois, I went to Sacred Heart Griffin High School.
Sure, and it's very close to the ocean, Springfield, Illinois, sure.
Yes, so I was looking at various options for enlistment, but I had a school guidance counselor who recommended that I attend the Naval Academy summer seminar after my junior year of high school, which is a week-long orientation about what the Naval Academy is and about kind of shows you what midshipmen go through on a day-to-day life. I went, I really enjoyed it, then I applied and got into the Naval Academy.
Well, before you go any further, let's talk a little bit about that orientation program. How did you find out about it? Your counselor knew about it, or did you apply for it? If someone locally would be interested in that, how would they go about doing it?
Yes, sir. So I found out through my guidance counselor. Her husband actually went to West Point, so that's how I had found out about it. Because I was not familiar with either of the service academies at the time. If a high schooler is interested in that, I recommend that they go to the Naval Academy's website, which is www.usna.edu.
Right? Great, and they have the information there.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. So you went to the academy, and what did you study?
I studied aerospace engineering.
And you became a submariner. It makes perfect sense.
Well, fluid dynamics and aerodynamics are basically the same thing.
Well, that's great. So how did you study aeronautical engineering and then be interested in becoming a nuclear engineer and a submariner?
I had a mentor at the Naval Academy who was a submariner, and he convinced me that it would be the best option for my own career path. At the time, he honestly knew better about myself than I did, because I like working close with people, and I like the challenge that being a submariner brings.
Well, in this case, you were working in close proximity of people as well. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
So you graduated from the academy, and then what was your first experience in the Navy?
Well, my first experience, like all submariners, we go to a nuclear power school in Charleston, South Carolina, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a 6-month school where we learn the foundations of reactor theory and how nuclear reactors work.
And I'm sure your engineering background helped you out there.
Yes, sir, it does. But I had a good friend of mine who was a political science major who did just fine. So
okay.
as long as you can memorize things well and are able to ask questions, you'll be just fine.
That's great. And that's a 6-month program.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then after that, a part of the training pipeline, I went to Saratoga Springs, New York, which has a place called Prototype, where we learn how to actually operate on a real reactor. So we operate as trainees with submariners who are on shore duty,
right,
who are at the school teaching us how to operate a real reactor. So you're there for 6 months, and then you go to your submarine after that.
Well, now you go to sub school somewhere in between.
Oh, yes, sir.
Right?
You do go to submarine school in Groton, Connecticut for about 8 weeks, which is the introductory how to drive the ship, how contact management, how we communicate with other ships while we're out to sea and things like that.
Do you also go through that big column escape thing? Tell us a
Yes,
little
sir.
bit about that, what I'm talking about.
So at sub school in Groton, they have, I think it's a 120-foot tank, and it looks like a big corn silo. And,
120 foot high, filled with water, right?
Yes, sir.
Right.
And you actually enter at the bottom, and you put on what's called a psi suit, or a submarine escape immersion suit. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that suit can be pressurized, and then you can literally float to the surface. It's a last means of resort on a submarine if a submarine was bottomed out on the bottom.
And you're floating to the surface, but you are not breathing. Is that correct?
Correct, but when I say float to the surface, it takes about 2 or 3 seconds. So.
Oh, is that right? Is
Yes,
that fast? Wow.
They encourage you to scream the whole time. So
Sure,
your
to
lungs
equalize
don't
your
expand.
lungs
Yes,
to go out. Wow, that must have been a lot of fun to
It
do that
was
the first time.
It was a lot of fun. Yes.
And what was your first boat?
The USS Alabama, which is a ballistic missile submarine out of Bangor, Washington.
Oh, sure. Well, and known for Crimson Tide, the movie. Is that right?
Yes, sir. We can't run in our missile compartment like Denzel did. It's a little smaller than that, but a lot of us tried.
So you were part of the ballistic missile force. It's
Yes,
also
sir.
part of the blue-green forces as well. Blue-gold, I'm sorry.
I-
Blue-gold. I was just talking to Marines earlier today, so that's why I got the blue-green, but blue-gold. And your experience was first in the northwest of the United States. Have you ever been there before?
I have not, no, sir. That was an amazing experience. It is a beautiful area. I'm glad everyone thinks it rains up there because it really doesn't, only in the winter. It's a marvelous place.
Well, that's great for a great first experience.
Yes, sir.
And now, Admiral Ellis was telling us that he went to Greenock to actually, or Holylock, I'm sorry, Scotland. Greenock is across the bay from Holylock, to do his change of command. But you did it right there in Bangor, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I don't believe we do not have any ballistic missile submarines in Holylock, Scotland anymore.
Right.
Although I do believe submarines have done port calls there.
All right. So everything is now changed back into the United States where
Yes,
we
sir.
do the crew changes themselves. And what job did you do on there?
I had a number of jobs. I was the reactor control assistant, which we manage the instrumentation and paperwork for the reactor, so we make sure all the temperature and pressure gauges and all that works appropriately.
Sure.
I was the main propulsion assistant for a time, which is in charge of all the engine room machinery gear. I was the communications officer and the quality assurance officer as well.
Now, through that process, and one of the first things that a junior officer in the submarine force has to do is pass their chief engineer's exam. So it sounds like your first two jobs really helped you do that. Did you wait until after your comm officer job to pass your chief engineers, or did you do it before you were given the comm officer job?
It was concurrently during. We actually go at our 2-year point, so each of those jobs you spend a year in, or you do two concurrently. But I was the communications officer when I went to PNEO, or our chief engineer's exam.
So, okay, right. So you passed that one, and that's the big milestone to get, besides being submarine qualified, of course, to move to your next position. So did you do anything before you came to MPS, or did you leave that boat directly to, or Alabama directly to here?
I actually went to Bahrain in between here and the Alabama.
Perfect, makes sense. You know,
Yes.
straight to.
I was at a destroyer squadron, so surface ships, there's a type called destroyer, and the command I was at is called a destroyer squadron, which has we actually had 16 ships that were under our Commodore's command.
Was Comm Desron 50?
Yes,
is that
sir.
right?
Comm Desron 50.
So what did they do with a submariner on a destroyer?
Well, every destroyer squadron has a submariner and an aviator who provide expertise in their areas of experience. Mine was anti-submarine warfare, so I went there as the ASW officer.
Now, did you fill a role in water space management? That's making sure that two submarines operate in different waters as well. Did you do that?
Yes, sir. We did that, and a lot of prevention of mutual interference, which is verifying the surface ships and the submarines aren't in the same
same
area.
water at the same place. That's
Yes, sir.
exactly right. So no bumping allowed is what you
Right.
want.
We worked. Actually, I did not do as much because there's not many submarines in the Middle East as there are, say, in the Pacific right now.
Right.
So I actually did a lot of exercise planning with our foreign nation counterparts, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Oman. I went to Djibouti. I had a great experience over there.
Well, this must have been both really a good professional experience in the fact that you learned different warfare areas associated with both the surface and air, while at the same time visiting all the countries that you just mentioned.
Oh yes, sir. It was we worked with Army, Air Force, Navy. Obviously, I was underway on half a dozen destroyers and 2 amphibs during my time. So
how did you come to Naval Postgraduate School?
well, while in Bahrain, I knew I was going to most likely get the shore duty that I desired, and I knew that as a part of our career path, we have to get a master's degree. So I figured there's no better place to get it than to come here to Monterey. I was interested in my degrees in oceanography.
Right.
And I was.
Oh, that's what you're studying now.
Yes, sir.
So your primary degree is in oceanography, plus you had to take all those interdisciplinary courses associated with undersea warfare as well.
Yes, sir. And that's what interests me about the program is I'm not just studying oceanography. We're studying probability and statistics. We're studying physics. We're studying acoustics. It's a very interdisciplinary, and I really enjoy that.
So I know before the show started, we were talking about a course you're taking called Tactical Oceanography. And that Tactical Oceanography course, what does that do after you learn the basics of oceanography and predictions, sound velocity profiles, sound through water? What does that class do?
That class really is I would say the capstone class of the USW students, because it operationalizes everything that we've learned through my year and a half here already. So as a submarine officer and as any ASW officer, it's very important to know the environment, because we can place ourselves in good position based off the acoustic environment, and it gives us an advantage over our adversaries.
So that kind of leads me into the topic of your thesis. Most resident students at MPS has to do a deep dive study of some sort. The Undersea Warfare program requires a complete published thesis, which is involved with new research or some level of research. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing as far as your research in addition to your coursework.
Yes, so I'm actually... The overall theme of the group I'm working in is non-acoustic detection of submerged objects.
Okay, but before we go any further, the main way we've been detecting submerged subjects before, or platforms before, is submarines, is through acoustics. That is, we try to hear them. Sound propagation, therefore, is important for us to study. But you're looking at non-acoustic detections, or ways in which to sense a submarine other than sound itself. Is that right?
Yes, sir. The reason why is because acoustics we'll be studying acoustics and working acoustics for years to come. It's the most important thing, but to give our warfighters an advantage, we should take advantage of every opportunity out there, and there are non-acoustic ways to detect submerged objects as well.
Let's talk about your thesis and what it's doing.
Yes, sir. So I'm looking at it's more of a in-depth look in the Arctic, because the Arctic is also a new up-and-coming important area for the Navy, and there's if you look at the sound speed profile there, or the density graphs, or what have you.
Now that's sound velocity profile is the speed of sound through water based on salinity, depth, and pressure. Is that, I got all those right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
So if you look at those graphs as you go in depth, there's a phenomenon in the Arctic called diffusive staircases, or thermohaline staircases, where if you looked at the graph, it actually looks like a set of stairs.
Right. For the speed goes
steps.
up or down based on depth? Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
And the idea behind that is if a submerged object goes through that water column, there will be mixing in that layer. And based off that mix, I'm researching through computer models. If there is an object that goes through that layer, and how can we observe the magnitude of mixing?
Oh, because the steps are so clear, what you're looking for is some sort of anomaly in those steps.
Yes, sir.
To indicate that something has gone through and mixed itself.
Yes, sir. And then if we can detect that, we would like to be able to quantify that, and then see if we can actually see if there's a time associated for reformation or reconstitution of that step. Now,
are you going to be one of the students that are going to be selected to go to the Arctic and put this to work, or you're staying warm in a computer bay?
My thesis is actually staying warm in a computer bay, but I am actually going to the Arctic.
Oh, you are? That's
with
great.
The Oceanography group.
And what are you going to be doing there? Besides being cold.
Yes. So there's 2 students and 3 professors, and we're going up to do more acoustic. We're going to look at the acoustic propagation paths because of the ice melt. The first 50 meters or so of the water column looks significantly different than it has in the past, so we want to go and gather data and collect more data for the Navy to use.
How long will you be there?
Well, we're currently planning about 6 days, give or take 2 or 3 days on each side.
Now, who is your thesis advisor for the stair-step?
My thesis advisor is Professor Timur Radko, and for the Arctic, it's Professor John Joseph.
Great. Oh, sure. So are you going to dress warm? How are you going to get equipment to go to the Arctic?
Well, I do own, I'm an avid hiker, so I do own quite a bit of cold weather gear, but we are being issued cold weather gear as well.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yes,
you got to turn that one in. That's going to be a fantastic. And when do you leave again?
Early March. So
right.
The days are still in flux, but we're going to probably be on the ice from the 2nd to the 8th of March.
It's still cold up there in Arctic. Well, it's actually still cold all the time
it's
up
cold.
there.
The temperatures are supposed to be around -20 to -30.
Oh, so. Sure. You'll be happy to get back for crying out loud.
That's right.
That's fantastic. Well, one of the things that you're having a great academic experience here, but let's talk a little bit about your impressions of Monterey and Monterey County. Besides studying and working on your thesis, which I know is your primary thing, that's for all your faculty listening. What other things have you done here in Monterey County that you enjoy?
Oh, the hiking in Monterey is fantastic. Living here in Monterey, you can drive 30 minutes south and you're in Big Sur, which is a fantastic area to hike, or even just drive if you're not into hiking along the Bixby Canyon Bridge and all of that. It's
right.
a beautiful area. We also go hiking in the Pinnacles, which is a new national park, about 45 minutes to an hour,
right.
I guess, east of here. And we also go kayaking up in Elkhorn Slough, which is the first time I've ever seen otters out in the wildlife, because the Monterey Bay Aquarium has done fantastic work rehabilitating them.
Did you get a chance to do any kayaking when you're in the Northwest?
Oh, yes. Not in the Puget Sound, but mostly like on Lake Washington, where Seattle's at, or the University of Washington's at.
That sounds like a nice things to do to help relax and ease the stress of the academic environment. So where do you go next after you graduate? And when did you graduate?
I graduate in June.
That's a good target.
Yes, sir.
After June, what happens?
I'm going to the Submarine Officer Advanced Course, or SOAC, which is our department head school for 6 months starting in July. And then I will head to a submarine after that.
But you don't have any orders?
No,
yet?
Sir. Not.
So you don't even know what kind of boat you're going to?
No, sir. We'll contact the detailer. The person who assigns us the boat, we'll contact him in March and discuss from there.
Well, the other question I wanted to ask you was, you did a great job reviewing your professional history and what you've experienced. Can you tell us the most adventurous thing that happened to you in your service to date?
There's a couple things. As a submariner, I think taking the boat to periscope depth, where you go from deep to where you stick an antenna out and be able to look around, I think that's adventurous every time I do it. And that's
well,
why
you have to explain why. Most people don't understand why that's so dangerous.
Well, it's dangerous because as you're going up to periscope depth, you think you know where all the contacts are acoustically, but that's all. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's a guess.
Right.
I mean, we have better guesses than others, but when you get up there, you never really know what you're going to see until you get up there. There might be a fisherman, there might be a tanker, there could be anything. But we're really good, so we typically don't have those issues.
And what's your other one?
My other one, as a Desron 50 sailor, I got to fly on an Army Black Hawk at night, which was pretty cool over the water. I did multiple landings on helicopters onto various ships, which was also a very good experience.
That's a great adventure in itself. Well, Lieutenant James Davis, thank you very much for both your service to our country and for your time here being on the YourTown television program.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of YourTown television program brought to you by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. Please join us again to learn more about interesting faculty and students and what they're doing at NPS.